Ethan Miller woke before the sun rose, staring at the ceiling of his cramped basement apartment with paint peeling above his bed. He'd practiced every line in his head for this interview. He needed this job more than anything he'd ever needed. His worn brown jacket lay folded at the foot of the bed, his only suit pants pressed as neatly as he could manage the night before. He ran a hand over his unshaven chin and told himself to look confident, even though the mirror near the sink told him otherwise. Today had to be different. He stuffed his folded resume into an old, cracked leather folder that his father had once owned. He clutched it tightly as he double-checked that the single bus fare in his wallet was still there. His watch ticked a few minutes past 6, and he knew he couldn't waste a second. He pulled the door closed behind him, locked it, and stepped into the early chill of the morning. He took a deep breath, willing the cold air to wake him fully as he walked briskly down the narrow street toward the bus stop. The streets were nearly empty except for the delivery trucks and the occasional jogger in bright sneakers and headphones. As Ethan neared the stop, he felt the pit of nerves return. It was just one interview. He'd had dozens before, but none had felt this big. This company was known for hiring upward, giving second chances to people like him, people with no fancy degree, but plenty of grit. His boots hit the cracked pavement hard as he rounded the corner, spotting the green bus shelter ahead. He reached the stop just in time to see the bus rumbling down the street, its headlights cutting through the dawn haze. He climbed aboard, dropped his fare in the slot, and chose a seat near the window. The bus smelled faintly of coffee and damp wool coats. Ethan rested his head against the cold glass, counting the blocks in his mind. He mentally recited his lines again. Strengths, weaknesses, where do you see yourself? All the words he'd said so many times they felt rehearsed and hollow. As the bus crawled through traffic, Ethan checked his cheap wristwatch every other minute. He thought about the way his mother used to remind him that good things come to those who help others. He'd done his best to live by that, though life had paid him back with long nights, odd jobs, and never quite enough to get ahead. He squeezed the leather folder tighter, ignoring the ache in his empty stomach. The bus rolled to a gentle stop at a red light near a busy intersection where early commuters spilled coffee onto sidewalks. Suddenly, the bus jolted slightly and then idled. Ethan glanced out the window and saw a line of cars stalled behind a silver sedan parked awkwardly across the intersection. Steam rose from under its hood in ghostly curls. Ethan's first thought was how every minute now mattered. But as he squinted through the fogged glass, he saw a woman standing next to the car. She wore a smart grey coat and neat heels, completely out of place in this mess. One hand clutched her phone to her ear, the other was pressed against her temple like she was trying not to panic. The bus driver tapped the horn once. The woman looked up and gave a helpless shrug. Ethan glanced at his watch. He could stay put, keep rehearsing, pretend he didn't see her, but he remembered his mother's voice again. Do right, Ethan, even if it costs you something. He stood up before he could talk himself out of it. He pressed the stop cord, slipped past the annoyed bus driver, and stepped into the cold air. His breath fogged around him as he jogged toward the stranded car. "Hey, ma'am, you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice calm, but his heartbeat thrumming with anxiety. She lowered her phone and forced a small, embarrassed smile. "I don't know anything about cars," she admitted with a short laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I called for roadside assistance, but they said at least 45 minutes. I'm blocking everyone, and I don't know what to do." Ethan peeked under the hood. Steam hissed softly as he leaned in, careful not to touch anything too hot. He spotted the problem quickly. A battery cable had slipped free. Easy enough, if you had hands that weren't shaking from cold and nerves. "Got a wrench or a kit?" he asked. She nodded and popped the trunk, revealing a neat emergency kit with a few basic tools inside. Ethan's fingers worked fast, tightening the clamp with practiced care. His father had taught him small fixes like this back when they'd had an old pickup that broke down every other week. "Try it now," Ethan said, stepping back. She climbed inside, turned the key, and the engine sputtered before humming to life. Her face lit up in pure relief. She jumped out, eyes wide with gratitude. Thank you so much. Please let me pay you something, she said, already fumbling in her purse. Ethan shook his head, forcing a smile. No need. I'm just glad it started up for you. He checked his watch again. The hands had not paused for him. He was already late. At least let me get your name. Are you sure? She insisted, but he was already backing away, lifting his folder like a shield. I really have to go. Good luck with the car, he called out, pivoting back toward the bus stop. He jogged the next block and saw his bus rumbling off, red taillights disappearing into the sea of cars. Ethan stood there, catching his breath, telling himself that maybe there'd be another bus, another shot. He didn't feel regret exactly, only a quiet, sinking ache in his chest. He walked the next mile hoping to find a taxi, but none stopped. He texted the HR contact to explain he was on his way, but the reply came back, "We're sorry. The panel has moved on to other candidates. Best of luck." Ethan stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the words blur on his cracked phone screen. He felt foolish and strangely empty, the cold seeping through his jacket as he turned around to walk back the way he'd come. As he trudged home, Ethan thought about the woman's smile when her engine turned over. He wondered if he'd done the right thing after all. He reached his small apartment as the sun finally rose behind him, painting the city in soft gold he couldn't feel. He closed the door, dropped his leather folder on the table, and sat on his worn couch with his head in his hands. Sometimes doing right cost more than you thought you could afford. 3 days passed, and Ethan spent them drifting between job boards, the library, and his cold apartment. He ate stale crackers, sipped lukewarm coffee, and kept reading motivational quotes that felt emptier with each click. He replayed the moment with the stranded woman over and over, wondering if he'd thrown away his last chance. Some nights, he dreamed of showing up for that interview on time, sitting in a bright office, shaking hands with people who actually wanted him there. But reality pulled him back. The folder lay untouched on his table, still holding that one resume inside. On Friday morning, Ethan forced himself out to a local hardware store, hoping to ask about any part-time labor they might have. He wore the same jacket, the same worn shoes, telling himself anything was better than nothing. As he crossed the street, he spotted a black luxury sedan parked at the curb, a familiar shape that tugged at a distant corner of his mind. He shook it off. Too many cars looked alike in this part of the city. He stepped into the store, bracing for rejection before he'd even spoken to the bored manager behind the counter. Inside, the stale smell of dust and paint greeted him. The manager, an older man with wiry gray hair and a permanent scowl, looked him up and down like he'd already said no. "No new hires today," he muttered before Ethan could even finish his question. Ethan managed a polite nod, thanked him anyway, and stepped back onto the sidewalk. He stared at the cracked concrete, wondering if he should spend his last few dollars on bus fare to the other side of town. Maybe the construction yard had day work left. Maybe he'd get lucky. Maybe... A voice behind him broke his downward spiral. "Excuse me, are you Ethan Miller?" He turned, startled, to find a woman stepping out of the sleek black sedan. She wore a navy coat and carried herself like someone used to being obeyed. It took him a second, but recognition hit him. The woman with the stalled car. She was even more composed now, her hair pinned neatly, her smile calm and deliberate. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. "Yes, ma'am," he answered, clearing his throat nervously. She extended her hand and he shook it, still stunned. "I've been looking for you," she said with a hint of humor dancing in her voice. "You didn't leave your name that day. Made it very hard for me to thank you properly." Ethan chuckled, awkwardly scratching the back of his neck. "I was just glad I could help. Sorry if I made you late." She waved off his apology like a leaf in the breeze. "I wasn't late. You were the one who missed something important. I only found out later why you ran off. Your interview." Ethan felt heat rush to his cheeks. He glanced down at his scuffed boots. "It's okay, really. I should have... Well, it doesn't matter now." She studied him carefully for a moment, her eyes sharper than he remembered. "It matters to me. I'm sorry for how things turned out for you. That's partly why I'm here." Ethan's eyebrows pulled together. He didn't understand what a woman like her could want with a man like him, a stranger who fixed her battery in the cold. Before he could find words, she gestured toward the open car door. "Come with me, Ethan. There's something I'd like to show you. No strings, I promise. Just a few minutes of your time." He hesitated. Instinct told him he should say no. He didn't belong near luxury cars and smart coats. But something in her tone felt safe, genuine. He climbed into the back seat and sank into the plush leather as the driver pulled away from the curb. The city blurred by through-tinted windows. He tried not to fidget, but his knee bounced nervously the whole ride. They pulled up in front of a gleaming glass building downtown, the kind of place Ethan had only ever seen from the sidewalk. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished wood and fresh coffee. She led him past a smiling receptionist who greeted her as Mom, and past rows of modern open offices where people in smart suits typed busily. Ethan felt invisible and exposed all at once. She stopped in front of a frosted glass door, etched with gold letters, CEO, beneath her name. It finally clicked in his mind. "You're the CEO," Ethan said softly, almost to himself. She turned, amused. "Yes, and you're the man who missed his shot because he chose to help a stranger." She opened the door and gestured him inside. The office was warm and spacious, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline. On her sleek desk sat a folder, his folder. She'd somehow tracked it down, or maybe HR had told her. Either way, it lay open, his resume inside, neatly smoothed out despite its age and creases. She walked behind the desk and motioned for him to sit across from her. Ethan lowered himself into the soft leather chair, afraid to lean back, afraid to breathe wrong. She tapped the folder gently with one manicured finger. "You missed your chance once. I'd like to give it back to you, if you still want it." His throat went dry. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say," he whispered. She smiled, kind but firm. "Say yes, Ethan. Come work for me. Not because you fixed my car, but because you showed me who you really are when no one was watching." Ethan felt the lump in his throat grow larger. He forced a breath out and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I'd like that very much." She extended her hand across the desk again, and this time, when he shook it, he felt the weight lift from his chest. She pressed a small company badge into his palm. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Miller. First day's Monday. Dress code simple, just show up as yourself. The rest we'll figure out together." He left her office 10 minutes later, stepping back into the busy hallway with a grin he hadn't felt in years. When Ethan pushed through the building's revolving doors, the sunlight felt warmer, the city brighter. He stopped on the sidewalk and looked up at the mirrored glass that now reflected him too, no longer invisible, no longer overlooked. He thought of his mother's voice again. "Do right, Ethan, even if it costs you something." This time, it had paid him back more than he could have dreamed. He clutched the badge tightly and walked toward the bus stop, ready to start the next chapter of a life he'd almost given up on.